Welcome to the Redemptive Economics Podcast, where we are empowering Christian entrepreneurs to make a redemptive economic impact here in Pittsburgh and beyond. Let's get to work! Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Mike Hatch, and I am grateful once again to have you with us today, folks. And today I am interviewing Lindon Fowler, who is the executive director of Seneca Hills Bible Camp. You may have heard their advertisements on the show, and man, am I grateful for their support of redemptive economics and what we're doing here. Lindon has been a great supporter of that. The camp has been as well. And as I say in the ad, it is an incredible property. I really encourage you to check it out. He invites you during our interview to come up and visit. Man, do that. Go visit. Go check it out. Have him take you on a walk of the property, and maybe like I experienced, you might see some eagles flying. It was really amazing. So let me just introduce Lindon to you. Lindon Fowler took the helm of Seneca Hills in 2016 after 4 years working in operations and management in the energy industry. Lindon earned his degree in biblical studies from Geneva College and his Master of Divinity degree from Covenant Theological Seminary. He's an ordained minister, and working at Seneca Hills combines Lindon's passion for organizational health and heart for gospel ministry. And you're going to hear, you're going to hear that come out during this interview. Lindon loves sharing about Seneca Hills, and you'll hear that too, but with churches and working to create an atmosphere where campers and staff can grow in their love for the Lord and understand that all of life is discipleship. Man, I love his perspective on that, and he'll share some of that as well. One of Lindon's favorite things about working at camp is getting to care for summer staff and be part of their lives. So now I have to say that unfortunately during this interview, my family had just moved, and we're in a new living situation. And my dog, during this interview, our dog really had a hard time adjusting, at least for the first couple days. And of course, the first day that we are there in our new digs is when I recorded this interview. And you'll hear Bear, our golden doodle. You'll hear him whining in the background from time to time. And I must admit, I was distracted during this interview. So if I come off as not being 100%, I apologize. But I think what Lindon has to say is so valuable. I think you'll get a ton of perspective from it. And man, I love his heart. As it says in his bio, I love his heart for discipleship and for developing healthy culture. And he did just that in a profound way at Seneca Hills Bible Camp. So again, make sure you check it out. It's an incredible property, incredible camp. And again, I'll throw this out there again. You'll hear the ad in this during this episode as well. I will be at the Man Camp at Seneca Hills, which is coming up in March. And there are links in the show notes to find out more about that. And man, it'd be great for you to join me there. It is an incredible, really fun experience, and it'd be awesome to hang out with you. Maybe if you're a listener here in the area and I haven't met you yet, it'd be fun to meet you there. So, all right, gang. Also, again, thank you for supporters of the podcast. Thank you for those of you who've come alongside to support financially and become ministry partners. We are so grateful for you. You're helping in tremendous ways, helping entrepreneurs be empowered to make a redemptive economic impact. All right, gang, here is our interview with Lindon Fowler. Lindon, welcome to the podcast, brother. Man, I am so happy to have you today.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be with you and privileged to be on.
So, man, Lindon, you're someone that I'm excited to have on because you've got a unique entrepreneurial role that I believe that a lot of us as entrepreneurs will be able to glean a ton of value and insight from your experience and some of the things you've learned in your role as, I'll make sure I get this right, camp director, right? Is that your title?
Executive director.
Thank you.
But I just tell people I work in the office whenever I see them at camp.
Yes.
And let them draw whatever conclusions they want.
Yeah. So sorry, you are the executive director of the camp. Okay. Got it. Make sure I...
Yeah.
Okay.
I finally feel heard by you.
So folks, if you haven't noticed, Lindon has a unique, wonderful sense of humor that you're going to experience during this interview. So I'm excited for that too. But all right, Lindon. So I would love to hear, first of all, let's start out as we normally do. I would love to hear a little bit of background of your faith journey and kind of your professional experience as well. So you can start whenever you want, preferably when you were born, and we'll go from there.
Okay, well, I was there when I was born, but I
Oh,
don't
good.
remember a lot of
That's
those
good.
details. But
Yeah.
I'll jump forward. I appreciate the opportunity to start
Okay.
back
Okay.
all those decades ago. But I grew up in a believing home, and I had wonderful parents who were very supportive, very others focused. My dad
Hmm.
was a firefighter, my mother
Oh,
was a
wow.
nurse, and so they were always kind of serving and caring for others, and
Hmm.
worship and involvement in the community of faith was always a high priority. And
Hmm.
with that, as many of us do as we get older, we have more freedom that we're given. And so it was kind of like the end of my high school time that I was not living out the faith that I had been raised with, and was just sort of pursuing what I wanted to do. I had gone to Votech. I was in an apprenticeship program and started
Hmm.
working before I graduated high school. And then when I graduated high school, I was working as a apprentice tool and die maker at Penn United Technologies in Saxonburg,
Wow.
and never envisioned I would go to college or seminary or serve in ministry. It was just like I want to make money, and kind of had mapped out my life as a 18, 19-year old. But it was during that time that as I was able to have that freedom to make those choices of not taking faith seriously, that I had been raised. And I would say I was a Christian, and uh, but I wasn't living that way. It was kind of that the routine of going to work,
Hmm.
coming home, going
Mm-hmm.
back to work, coming home, and staying up way too late as a young man. That it was during that the Lord started to get my attention to say there's more to life than what you're living
Hmm.
for. And so through that, I had some really wonderful friends who had invited me to be a part of an outreach event. They were youth leaders at the church I had grown up in, and I was out. I was a young adult working, and they had invited me to an outreach event. And I don't know if you remember, the bodybuilder groups. There was what, Strike Force, and
Oh, yes. Oh,
there
yes. I
was
remember.
another one. It wasn't Strike Force, but there was another one that came to Northway.
Yeah.
This is in 1999 that I heard. Tad was the bodybuilder. He
Yeah.
shared his testimony and presented the gospel again, and it clicked. Like the
Huh.
Holy Spirit like made it alive for me, that I went forward that night and reaffirmed my faith in Jesus and
Hmm.
started to live a new life. And so
Wow.
that was kind of a huge turning point for me. It was February 3rd, 1999, that I went forward. And then following that, all of the things that I had built for my life began to change. I went to work, and I was like, okay, I automatically changed the things I was listening to, the way I
Yeah.
conducted myself.
You started bodybuilding, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can tell. I've got this shirt on
Yeah, I
that
can
really
see.
hides it.
It's
It's a slimming
okay.
shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny.
Uh, Got me off guard with that one.
Sorry. I know. I know.
No,
I,
I didn't know you knew I body built, but I appreciate that.
no, well, it's interesting, real quick, just because I attended that one of those events at Northway,
Okay,
but it was
okay,
back in the '80s when I was younger,
okay.
a kid. My dad took me, and I want to say the name was they were Power something or something Power. Power was, I feel like, in the
Oh, Power
name,
Team. Like, was it Power Team? And maybe
maybe.
it was Strike Force that I went to. But
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
and
I
then
think there were like two main ones.
yeah, they tear the phone books in half and everything, right?
Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Oh man, that was amazing. Yeah, I actually, and I was so young. I was probably like 7 or 8, and I actually went forward and walked back to the follow up room, and
Okay.
nobody nobody talked to me because I think I was so young. Maybe they thought it was someone else, but Yeah, anyway, that had a huge impact on me. So it's fun that you
Okay.
share that. Yeah, that was great. So so that impacted you, and you said that was a turning point for you in your
Yeah,
faith. Yeah.
it was. So I went back from that. The girl I was dating, I remember telling her, "Hey, this happened," and her response was, "Well, that's nice. It won't last. That's just a spiritual high." And I like that
Wow.
just really was jarring for me. And I was like, "No, there's something different about this." Like I've been on youth retreats
Hmm.
before, and so I
Was
broke
she a
up with her.
Christian? Okay.
I would have said like we were both kind of the same Christian. Like we
I
weren't
see.
serious about our faith and that making a
Okay.
difference in our life. And so I broke up with her like that week. I was like, no, something's different. Like, if you're not going to be supportive, like, I need to be encouraged and supported in this. So,
Mm-hmm.
and began to sense, and I don't know where this came, I began to sense a call to ministry. I'm like, well, I need to go to college because
Hmm.
I need to be a pastor. That was just so bizarre. Like I had zero interest in going to college, zero interest in being back in a classroom. Like I love to learn, but the classroom has always been really difficult for me.
Oh, I relate
And
to that.
and so I went, kept doing the job thing, and then I ended up quitting right around Memorial Day in 1999 and started
Hmm.
summer classes or something.
Hmm.
But I went to Butler Community College and Geneva College,
Hmm.
and kind of during that process, and I'm condensing a lot of life.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So you quit the job that you worked. What was the place called again?
Penn
Uh,
United.
Penn United. You quit that to go to school full time.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I quit that. I had been working, I think it's about 2 years, 2.5 years, and
Okay.
I had quit um, to go to college. And I was volunteering in the youth ministry, and so I just got a lot of encouragement and affirmation
I see. Okay.
and in the direction.
Hmm.
And so it's like, oh wow, this is pretty wild. When I transferred to Geneva College, our church had planted a church in Cranberry that
Hmm.
the planting pastor had said, "Hey, why don't you come and do youth ministry for me at the church plant?" And I said, "No."
Really?
And yeah, I did. And
Okay.
then several weeks later, I went back to him and said, "Yeah, I think I'll do that." And we had just joined with a church that had a dying church had called him, and we got their building, got some assets, and
Hmm.
they joined our work. And we changed our name, and so I did that for a year and a half, 2 years.
Why did you say no initially?
I have no idea. That was like
Just a knee jerk
20,
reaction.
yeah, 20-year-old Lyndon. He's like, do you want to come start a youth ministry program? It's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I was just totally happy where I was.
Yeah.
And, but then I thought about it, thought this would be good. And it was a great experience. It was really hard. I
Yeah.
remember starting with I had one student coming on Sunday nights for several weeks. It just was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take forever.
Yeah. Oh man.
Um, but so I did that, and then when I graduated college, there wasn't space in the budget to hire me full time, so I left, went back to volunteer in my home church, and I got a job in industry. I sold industrial shipping and packaging products
Okay.
for a company in Butler, and did that for a year and a half, and
And were you
eventually,
expecting that to be a short term thing? Like, were you thinking, I'll just get this job for now until God points me to the ministry I'm supposed to be part of?
probably.
Okay.
But it was through that then I got a job as a youth director in Alabama. So I went to Alabama for two
Oh, I
years
see.
with the goal of, I'm gonna put 5 or 10 years in, and then I'll go to seminary. Wanted to get some experience before I went to seminary. But then
Hmm.
almost 1 year to the day, the pastor who had hired me called me in his office and said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm leaving." So this is like November 1st. I'm leaving
Oh,
at
wow.
Christmas. So
Woo.
Christmas Eve will be my last Sunday here, or last service. I was like, "What? I came here to work for you." Like he was
Whoa.
a wonderful leader, a great pastor, and so my wife and I began to talk about, okay, what's next? Maybe this means that seminary is sooner, and so we began to
Hmm.
pray about that. That was in December, and I ended up applying finally, and sometime in the spring, applied for seminary. We just built a house in Alabama.
Oh
I had
man.
moved in and sold the house before it went on the market. I got seminary housing after the deadline. I got accepted after all the deadlines had passed, and all of these doors
Wow.
were like affirming, "Hey, God's making a way for us to go to seminary." And I went to seminary in St. Louis at Covenant Seminary. And I always thought I'd serve in the local church. And at the end of our seminary, 2008, the financial crash
Oh,
of things,
absolutely.
like just
Yep.
changed up the whole order of how pastors would move on and retire.
Hmm.
And I graduated in 2010 and couldn't find anything. And I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to move my family around.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go somewhere to be able to stay there. If I couldn't, in good conscience, invest for the long term, I didn't even apply. And
Hmm.
I got a lot of advice saying, "Oh, just get your foot in the door somewhere." And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that to the church like that.
Hmm.
I don't think that's what the church needs. We just kind of
Hmm.
waited it out, had a great job in seminary, had good internship, but I worked at a condominium, a fancy condominium where I was a door attendant. So I got to wear a
Really?
nice blazer, had a little emblem on the
Yeah.
one side, and I sat at the door where I actually got to sit at a door and I just buzzed people in. I didn't have
Oh
to
my
get up. I just
gosh.
had to buzz people in to let them
Wow.
go up. And it's always great during school. And then after I had graduated, I was able to work part time or actually full time as a maintenance helper. The one of the maintenance
Hmm.
men was deployed
Hmm.
overseas in the military, and so I was able to work. And so I had a
Hmm.
full time employment as we were just like waiting and praying, what God, what do you have for us? And then
Yeah.
in 2012, we moved back to Pennsylvania. We had our first child in 2009, and I never envisioned moving back to the area because my wife was born in Mississippi, grew up in South Florida, and when we got married, she said, "I don't want to live in Western Pennsylvania," and I said, "Okay." And then we had our first child, and she said, "You know what? I don't think I'd mind living in Western Pennsylvania." And so we ended up moving back to Western PA. I did some construction for a few months, and then I got a job in the energy industry, and that's where I did sales in
Hmm.
the combinations business for the oil and gas in the Marcellus Shale and the Utica plays, and really did
Yep.
well with that. I started as a sales rep,
Hmm.
and I think 3 to 4 months later, they were interviewing for a district sales manager position. So I'm like, well, I'll apply for it. I asked my boss, I'm like, should I apply for it? He said, well, yeah, you might as well. I was the newest guy there. I think we had three other sales reps who had been there for anywhere
Hmm.
from 6 to 8 months to a year or two, and I
Hmm.
got it. I got the role of district sales manager. Like, oh my gosh, this is wild. So I didn't
Yeah.
think I'd get it, and so I enjoyed that. I did that for a while, and then about 6 months later, the operations manager of our Cannonsburg yard left, and I was like, well, this would be really good experience for like being an executive pastor. And so my
Hmm.
wife and I talked about it, and so I applied for it, and I ended up getting it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is wild, and so
Yeah.
it was great. I mean, we were growing like crazy, and I think before I left, I had about 35 employees. I had two assistant managers, and our yard, we were doing about $12 million a year or so,
Wow.
and it was an incredible training experience. I had to fire a lot of people, got to hire a lot of people, and it
Wow.
was post seminary probably the best equipping for the role that I have now of how to do a budget, um, how to manage people, and how to
Yeah.
build a healthy culture. Because that was what I had started at that
Mm-hmm.
company, and then what I really started to do once I got to Seneca Hills as executive director. So I think I answered your
That's
question.
amazing. No, yeah, you
That's
absolutely you did. Yes. I I'm blown away by it's so funny. So you didn't end up where you thought you were going to when you started. I think, and you said you've listened to the different episodes on the podcast. You know, Darren Grove was, mentioned that he said as entrepreneurs, you're doing it right if you don't end up where you think you start when you where you think you are going to when you start. And you had this vision in mind of being a pastor at a church. And I would argue that you are very pastoral, and you do have a pastoral role in what you do as the executive director of Seneca Hills Bible Camp. I'm curious, when that opportunity came up to become the executive director there, was that like, oh yeah, totally makes sense, or was it wait, it wasn't exactly what I was hoping, but maybe I'll try it? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, no. So I'm glad you're asking that question because
TBD Bookkeeping is who I use for my bookkeeping needs, and I'm thrilled to recommend them to you. As business owners with 3 kids themselves, Ryan and Danielle Hatch understand the value of time and the importance of work-life balance. TBD Bookkeeping can take over the day-to-day bookkeeping of your business so you can focus more on growth, operations, and customer relationships. I can speak from experience. If you're a business owner, you need a bookkeeper, and TBD Bookkeeping is simply the best in the business. Find their contact information in the show notes, and when you mention Redemptive Economics, you'll receive 10% off your first 3 months. Call TBD Bookkeeping today and learn more about the benefits I've experienced: more time, peace of mind, and the ability to plan for the future.
I'm glad you're asking that question because I think one of the really cool things about the role at Seneca is 3 things happened on that day. So I mentioned I was operations manager, but then I did that for a year, and then I was tired of driving to Canonsburg. I live in Grove City. Like we've lived in the same house now for 12 years or 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I'd spend an hour and 15 getting to the office and then an hour and 15 to almost 2 hours, depending on how many accidents there are around South Point. That just
Right.
seems to be like the worst
Oh my
stretch
gosh. Yeah.
of 79. I became regional sales manager, and I got the privilege of doing that job and the operations job. So I got to go to the office and add like more travel regionally as well as for the sales to Houston and Louisiana into my workload. So it was really a
Oh my
gift. And I'm being
gosh.
really sarcastic here
I was gonna,
that
yeah, right. I'm
it
thinking
was a
like that's
lot.
intense. Oh my
And so
gosh.
so once they hired my replacement for the operations role, I kind of was able to breathe and was realizing I don't want to do this anymore. And so
Mm,
like that began like the shift of what's next. What can I do?
mm-hmm.
I was in the talks with a competitor who manufactured their own houses and had several conversations with their business development guy.
Mm.
And we were like one conversation away from me going to work for him. But here, this is where I think it's really interesting that 3 things happened on the same day,
Okay.
and which got my attention. That I need things like that. That the guy had texted me and said, "Hey, I was just let go. We're not going to be able to work together." I was
Mm.
like, oh, that was a ton of wind out of my sails. I was
Yeah.
just so discouraged because I thought, great, this place is closer.
Mm.
I will have a new set of responsibilities. I'm not going to have to travel like I did, and I'll be in charge of the manufacturing side of things, which I thought would be really cool. So that happened. A board member from Seneca Hills called me and said, "Hey, our director just announced he is resigning. Would you pray about applying?" And I
Hmm.
thought, okay, never really thought about that. And then the third thing was my wife and I had already had plans that day to go and have dinner with a friend of mine and his wife, who's a camp director in Elwood City at Pine Valley Camp.
Mhm. Wow.
So those 3 things happened. So right before we got out of our car, when we were going to have dinner with them, like I looked at my wife and I said, "Well, I guess we should think of our time here and we need to ask the question of can we see ourselves doing camping ministry?" So we said that before we got out of the car. We had 3 kids at that time and went out and had it. That was in the summer. I think that was like sometime July of 2015,
Yeah.
and the position eventually opened up at Seneca, and the previous director ended in September. They didn't have the application, like any of those things, due till it was like the end of November. I had just turned in my resume and cover letter, It was, I think, the week of Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
Then 2 or 3 days later, I was laid off from the company I was working for,
What?
and so I was unemployed for 3 months, and I sent one resume out, and I just prayed a lot, like, Lord, I sure hope this is where you're calling me, because if not, I have a lot of work to do to find a job for my
Whoa.
family. So I was unemployed for 3 months and ended up getting the job. They offered it to me on Valentine's Day in February of 2016.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Brother, what what a series of events.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, there's no denying that God absolutely has you where you are for a very specific purpose, and that He orchestrated your steps. That is amazing. And the other piece to this too is the experience. In so many, your experience is so varied, from kind of the blue collar kind of side of things, and what you did, your training in trade school, and then going off to college, sales and marketing, executive leadership, seminary training, knowing that you're the executive director of a camp. All that makes tons of sense, that it would play into who you are and what you're doing now. Did you feel like, as you were, looking or interviewing or sending the resume, did the camp board give you any indication of, like, oh wow, you could be a great fit?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that one of the board members called me, and then I later learned, like, there was a number of times that it said my name just kept coming to him
Interesting.
at different times at camp. I mean, I think early on, I think if it were up to me, I probably would have not gotten the job.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my wife was a part of the second interview, and I think she helped win it over. Like,
That's
so
amazing.
the role I had before was really intense, and like we were very busy. I had
Mm,
a couple of safety incidents, and I had to do
mm.
presentations with the executive leadership of the energy company and our company, who had flown together to be together in Houston for these. And I'm in Cranberry Warrendale in their satellite office, like presenting, hey, here's what happened, and here's how we're gonna not let it happen again. And oh, I mean, it
Wow.
was it was really intense. So I didn't interview with the same type of um, fun interaction that I have
Oh
here,
yeah.
like with
Yeah.
any sense of humor. I was like, here, I know these are the problems you're having. Like, they were struggling with money. Like, my predecessor, he was a great preacher, a great teacher, but his
Mm,
management ability was not
hmm.
very strong. And so the culture was bad, the finances were
Yeah.
bad, and so there were a number of things that just were not the way they ought to be. And so I was in problem solving,
Yeah.
here's what we need to do mode. And so
Yeah.
I don't think I really interviewed well, but my wife is a
Oh, that's
great
so funny.
storyteller, and I think won them over on the second interview that helped distinguish me from the other candidate and his wife.
So, wow. Okay. It's just amazing. Again, this seems to be a theme with all the different entrepreneurs that I interview, is that nobody ends up where they think they're going to when they start. It's just amazing that the path that God weaves for us, and how He's preparing you along the way for where you're going to be eventually. Even though you don't know what that looks like. You had a vision, you had a thought that you were going to be a pastor at a church, leading a congregation, and then this opportunity came up, and of course you jumped at it. So I give you a ton of credit for continuing to move. And I was going to say, I was at a Live to Lead leadership conference recently, and one of the things that John Maxwell said, which I think is very true, is that you have to move. You have to start moving in a certain direction, and not just stand still. A lot of us get paralyzed by analysis, or what's it called? Analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
Because I think often we want to control where we're going and how we get there. And it's just interesting. Not that there weren't moments, I'm sure, where you try to pull back on the reins that God, or take the reins from God. You probably had moments like that of frustration and discouragement and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
But
never. I was
it's
always totally
yeah,
humble,
Yeah.
grateful. Oh my gosh, yeah, so many. I was angry for a number of different times for a number of different reasons when
Yeah.
things were not the way I wanted them to be.
Man, that's so interesting. And it's not even like it's the story's not over, right? Like who knows how long you're
Right.
going to be there? If you might retire working there, or who knows, maybe you end up somewhere else before whatever. You just never know where God's leading you, but you know and you can trust that He's preparing you for what He has next for you, no matter where you are in a moment. Man, that's reassuring, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, and it's so funny too, as you're sharing, I'm thinking like, man, there's similar like alignment in some ways with our stories. My son was born in 2009 as well. So I had our first child then. We made a move in 2013 to join a church in Pittsburgh as a pastor. And I did seminary during that time. I want to say I graduated around 2015, 2016, something like that. Yeah, it was just interesting as you're sharing. I'm like, some of the dates, I'm thinking, wow, our story is similar or have a similar timeline in some ways. That's amazing. How was your wife? Was she pretty excited about the camp director job or executive director job?
Uh, yeah. I mean, my wife has been like a tremendous encourager, like all along the way. I think
Hmm.
she believed in whatever ministry I had before I had it. Like she
Wow,
just has been so supportive of that. And
that's
and
amazing.
now, so for the role that it is, it's drastically different than the last job. So I'd leave my old job
Mm-hmm.
5:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I'd get home at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And I started the job, I had two kids. When I left the job, I had three kids. So I didn't see them for any meals Monday through Friday. Saturday, I'm exhausted,
Oh, right.
still getting phone calls because of issues or incidents, whatever that have taken place
Mm-hmm.
within work. And it was a lot. So now it's something that we're all a part of. Like
Yeah.
we have moved on site during the summer, so we
Hmm.
typically live there. So it's great for my kids. My wife can see what I'm doing. She can be a part of things as much as she wants to,
Yeah.
or not. But we just get
Hmm.
to be around each other a lot more, and it's really
Hmm.
been great.
Man, that is so cool. That is so cool. Okay. Yeah, and having seen you in the role, you're an amazing fit. You know, getting to come to the man weekend, um, man camp, the one weekend, man, I was blown away by the camp, by the staff, by you, and your ability to provide hospitality. You know, and put people at ease. You were kind of the guy up front at the very beginning of every session, kind of making sure everybody had what they needed, etc. Your background and your knowledge, I feel like has lent so well to what you've had to do with the camp to help bring it to the next level. As you were saying, it sounds like that your predecessor didn't have some of the same skills, and you know God places people where they are, and we know that God uses them in however ways He wants to use them for specifically. But you have come in and done some pretty cool things. Well, and I guess let me start with this question as we kind of transition to your job now and finding a little bit more about what you do at Seneca. What was the biggest challenge that you think you had to face right as you started out?
Well, I knew. So the biggest challenge I knew there was the financial situation. Um,
Okay.
at the time, our budget was between 700 and $800,000 annually, and we had about anywhere from 90 to $130,000 in debt
Hmm. Oh wow.
at that time. And
Okay.
so, in our budget was running between a 20 and $30,000 deficit annually, and
Whew.
I don't like that.
Yeah. I wouldn't either. That does not sound like a good thing.
It's not, and
No.
so that was like the big problem that I.
Jeff Doherty with Allstate Insurance has the distinction of being the very first sponsor of the Redemptive Economics podcast, and I couldn't be happier to promote his services. I've known Jeff for many years now, both as his pastor and friend. And man, I can say with confidence that he is a man of strong faith who aligns well with the Redemptive Economics values. So reach out to Jeff. He can offer you options for a wide variety of coverage and services. He's committed to helping Pittsburgh residents assess their immediate and long-term needs and choose options that will help you achieve your goals. When you want to explore options for protecting your home, personal property, or financial future, Jeff Doherty is your guy. You'll find Jeff's contact information in the show notes. Hey, go grab a cup of coffee with him, get to know him, even if it's just to review your current coverage in case you need to make adjustments. And I promise you're going to love Jeff every bit as much as I do.
And so that was like the big problem that I knew. And when I interviewed, the push was you need to raise friends and you need to raise funds.
Hmm.
And so it's like, okay. But when I got there, what I discovered was an organization that had lost its way
Hmm.
of remembering and knowing who they are, why they exist, and where their place is to serve in the kingdom.
Hmm.
And so unpacking that, the culture among our staff, like every year we hire about 70 high school and college age students. And the culture among the staff was terrible. Like it was every different department was kind of out for themselves. They all thought what they did was the most important role at camp. Like there wasn't a collective, hey, we are all serving together towards a common purpose, common mission.
Hmm.
And from my first year to my second year, the first year I think we had hired about 90 to 96 summer staff. And what I did between 2016 and 2017 is I cut about 20 summer staff people, which saved about $15,000 to $20,000 from our budget, because we had so many people that there were so many people there that they weren't working. Like they were there for themselves. Like the culture had become, I'm here. Don't ask me to do anything because I'm here to hang out with my friends.
Oh, wow. And get paid for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't pay a lot. Like that's the thing about camp ministry is you don't pay a lot, but it was really really discouraging. Like that was probably the hardest issue to deal with. And my year-round staff I think we're tired, we're burnt out for a number of reasons, and so like revitalizing that culture and re-engaging staff was, I think I've got the financial piece that I remember vividly, the office manager saying, "Oh, we can't buy staples."
What?
Like we don't have money to buy staples. Like I remember that because we had an electric stapler. I went to staple something and she said, "Oh yeah, we don't have any staples. We can't afford them." It's like, okay, so we have that piece of the finances that we don't have any, and then you have the cultural piece that then is undercutting our mission as an organization. And so, I knew the budget very intensely. Those first several years was really, I could tell you where every bit of money was coming, going. Now, like I wrestle with, like, oh yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to look that up. Because we've come a long way. I mean, we're still not where I'd like us to be, but I don't know the same. I don't have the same intensity on that area of work. I'm now thinking, how do we go forward and engage more folks? But those would be the two big things would be the finances, but then getting in there, the culture. And then once I got in there and I started sharing with the board, hey, this is the culture of what's going on. They have been very adaptable to me and to the work that I'm seeking to do to bring about the transformation for the good of the organization.
So because when you mentioned the fact that you cut staff, I think by 20, I think is what you said. That with the summer staff, was that something that was only known by kind of the backroom folks or folks in leadership, or did some of the summer staff say, "Hey, wait, I'm normally hired, now I'm not"? Like, was there any pushback? I guess.
Well, I've gotten plenty of pushback. So one of the other things that we changed, I think everybody often says it, but you're not guaranteed a job. Can't just because you worked here 1 year doesn't mean you're guaranteed. I think they would have said that before I got there, but like we really applied that it's like, hey, that's great. And one of the
Mm.
things that I made my staff do is I said, look, if you have no intention of hiring somebody next year, they need to know that, and they need to know why before they leave this year. Like, I feel like that's just a simple, good
That's
management
great.
thing
Yeah.
that that's like you cannot wait until next year and be like, oh, I'm just not going to hire them, because I feel like that was a lot of the methods that the year-round staff were employing, that they weren't having the hard conversations with folks. And
Yeah.
it's not even about having the hard
Mm.
conversations. It's, I think, viewing the work that we do as a part
Mm.
of God's discipleship, not just for us. There's the challenging piece for us as leaders, but it's also for our employees of,
Yeah.
we want what's best for them, because we're dealing with 14-year-olds up to 23, 24-year olds,
Yep.
that we want them to be better followers of Jesus, better workers wherever God calls them. And so we need to take that seriously. And so
Mm.
so trying to change that mindset and say, look, this is how we need to communicate to folks, how we can help them, but we really need to have a bigger picture of how we're investing into these young men and women for the
Yeah.
sake of the gospel.
Man, I think that's a key piece that I think every business owner, entrepreneur, business leader can, especially as Christians, should, I think, take seriously. Obviously, if not everybody that works in a business is a Christian necessarily, but I think there's a way to take that, I guess, mentality, that discipleship mentality in a sense, and build into and invest in other people in ways that are beneficial for the way God is possibly working in their lives. Because God's active, whether you're a Christian or not. His kingdom is always active and at work. And so how are you, you know, even if someone who's not a Christian, how are you in your business contributing to that person's development in a way that may draw them closer to the Lord? As a business leader, though, discipleship and development, I know there are differences to them as you're developing someone professionally, but what would you say are the things that apply in both domains?
Well, one, intentionality.
Yeah.
I would say that's something that applies in both categories. And I think terminology maybe changes, but I would be comfortable using those words interchangeably,
Okay.
discipleship and development, because
Okay.
you're thinking about the faith journey of an individual, and how are they discovering how God has made them, what's their role within the Lord's kingdom, or you're looking from the developmental side of camp, of maybe it's a little bit more visionary on the development side, like, hey, here's where we're going, but it's it's still kind of the same thing, and help maybe a little bit more forward looking for the development side. But in a lot of ways, I would be comfortable probably interchanging both of those words at times for the purpose, because they're both development.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's right.
so,
It's a good point. Yeah, when we in our Truth at Work groups, our roundtables, one of the things that has come up is they want to be able to reproduce the transparency and vulnerability and kind of that community that they and connection they feel within that group, within our roundtable, where they work, and provide something like that for their employees. And again, what's unique to the roundtable is, I think, relates to what you're saying. It's a very direct place where things are said very directly. It's a safe, confidential place, but it's not always a soft place, you know.
yeah.
But it's also filled with great accountability and encouragement and affirmation at the same time, right? Yeah, I'm thinking about those attributes and applying those within a business context.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is, I think a good manager, a good leader, doesn't hold the information they know about somebody over them. And
Yeah. Hmm.
so I think that's part of, I would attribute to kind of the pastoral side of me, of like, people can gripe at me or dump on me or share things with me, but like, I keep that compartmentalized,
Hmm.
that I don't bring that out to use that against them, like if they're underperforming or whatever the issue is. And I think that's one of the challenges of, I don't bring things out shared in private in public, like, oh, so and so is, wrestling with XYZ. It's like, no, that's a private conversation we
Mm,
had. And but I think it goes back to the
mm,
idea that we have a role in one another's discipleship. And
yeah.
so just as the Lord doesn't use our sins and weaknesses against us,
Yeah,
like
right.
neither should
Hmm.
we use that against our employees or our coworkers
Hmm.
in the betterment of their society. Like, yeah, and that's
Yeah.
challenging. I love that idea. I love what I do, but that's one of the most challenging things, because sometimes this means you have to invest more time with people than you
Hmm.
feel like you have time for.
Interesting. What you said there is so key because okay, maybe I'm just going to kind of say it back the way I heard you say it because I think it was so good. So you have issues and problems and gripes that come to you from other people. It might be about other people. You're kind of like the principal in a sense. Like all the problems come to you, right? And so you have a certain perspective of the whole camp. And anybody who's a business owner can relate to this. You've got a certain perspective of the bigger picture of what's going on, where the problems are, where the weak links are, where the challenges are, and you have to value people, especially as a Christian, to value people in how you interact with them, but also not just interact with them directly, but how you interact with them from a bigger picture, and trying to manage those relationships to help get things done and accomplish tasks in a way that loves them unconditionally, but yet still challenges them, holds them accountable. What I've said before is that the business owner is a priestly role, wherever you are. If you're working for a Christian nonprofit or church or a secular business, especially if you're a Christian in that role, I think you have a priestly role. I don't know if that resonates, but
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And
Seneca Hills Bible Camp and Retreat Center Man Camp is coming up this March 7th through the 9th, 2025. And man, I'm telling you, I am going to be there, and I hope you will be too. Man Camp is an amazing opportunity to connect with God, with other men, and of course, with nature. Whether you come with a group or on your own, you are going to have a life-changing weekend. And take my word for it, guys. I was there last year, had an incredible experience. The property is beautiful, pristine, and man, you cannot beat the price. $140 to stay on campus, $105 for commuters. Check out the show notes below for the link for more information and how to register. And man, I hope I see you there.
yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that's absolutely the case on things. And as the leader, you know where you're trying to get to, or at least you should.
Right, right.
You know what the big picture goals are. And so when you have these different pockets of dissatisfaction or criticism or whatever, you have to figure out what is worth me engaging now, and
Mm-hmm.
what do I have to delay. And that's where the year-round staff that I have, like there have been times like they would come and they would gripe about other people or different things. It's like, I hear you. I'm really sorry that's hard for you.
Yeah.
But also, a lot of it is, have you talked to that person?
Oh yeah. So you're facilitating these conflicts and interactions with people. Wow. But
And,
that what a beautiful. Sorry. Go ahead. Finish up. Go ahead.
well, and so that's the challenging thing, because like people will have a lot of gripes.
Of course.
And then when you push back on them and say, have you raised this to that person?
Yeah.
That's when they start to become timid and be like, well, no, and they're like,
Right.
their boldness diminishes. And it's like, well, you really need to raise it with them, because I could go and deal with it. And and then they're going to see that the issue that is between the two of you,
Yeah.
that they have, like, you only each of you know it, but then you have just broken trust with them, because you've come to me and processed that, invented, and you want me to fix it, but you're not willing to fix it. So like, you can just create all sorts of trust issues within your
Yeah.
culture if you step in and deal with those issues rather than empowering them. And this is where it's frustrating, that it can take a lot longer for them to
Yeah.
deal with it
Yep.
than you could deal with it on your own. And so I would say this is the luxury I have as being in a ministry, that you don't have necessarily if you're in a business that your pursuit
Mm,
and your goals are going to be a little bit different than what
yeah.
I'm able to enjoy as being in ministry.
Right.
And so I want to say that, recognizing that,
Yeah.
because I can remember my last job. I had one of our technicians, what he was a sweet man. He had a very genuine faith. He loved the Lord, but I had to let him go because he
Mm.
was a terrible, terrible safety risk for our company. Like we had
Oh,
had a
wow.
number of issues with him, and and, and it was just like, if it were a different location, like if it were at camp, I probably could have worked with him. But in my old job, it's like, no, you are not safe for
Yeah.
what we're doing. That safety ratings are huge in the energy industry, that you can win and lose work by the basis of your safety rating. So
Yep.
had to make a difficult decision, to let somebody go with that, and consulting with HR on that. So I don't want to make it seem overly
Mm.
easy to deal
No.
with these things, but
Yeah.
um,
And
there's a lot of
yeah.
thoughtfulness that needs to go into how you engage folks.
Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, yeah, there are some assumptions you can have working in a ministry that people are Christians, but at the
Right.
same time, it can make it harder too because especially when someone maybe claims to be a Christian and they don't demonstrate the fruit of the Spirit, if you will, or they just don't act like Christians. I mean, ministries, and I know you would do everything you can to vet people as you're bringing them on staff, but there are some pros and cons there to having a Christian staff versus an unbelieving staff. I guess there's some trade-offs with each, but I think there's so many things that we can learn. Folks in business, as you're sharing some of the things that you've learned through this, especially because of your past experience in different executive roles and managerial roles that then now lead you to what you're doing now. A lot of things that you are implementing now in terms of your strategy and leadership, you learned in previous roles within the secular world. So it's interesting because was there a certain sense of, oh, wow, kind of relief that now I get to work just with Christians? And then what were some of those? Yeah, you gave me that look like, yeah, kind of not. What were some of those, I guess, presuppositions that had to be kind of put to bed or change in expectations as you took on the new role compared to the roles you had before?
I mean, one of the things is, I think, the directness that you can be in the secular world. I mean, I
Yeah.
even hate to say, so many times I feel like people overemphasize grace and forgiveness in ministry
Mm-hmm. Yep.
to I think, the deformation of our character in ministry. That it's like, oh, we're about grace, we're about forgiveness. Yes, we are, but we're also about excellence, like about goodness, about justice, about and so there's a lot more
Mm-hmm.
than just, we can't just lean on grace and mercy, like, oh, you're underperforming. Well, why is that? Like, what's going on? Do you not have the tools you need? Because you're entrusted, you are a steward of your area, and so within
Yeah.
ministry, are you bringing that to flourish? And if not, how can I help you as a leader? So, there's
Mm.
that side of it, but then, in the secular side is like, hey, here's the goals. You know very clearly what the metrics are. I mean, I was fortunate. I had a fantastic boss at the energy company that I worked for. He was
Mm.
a believer, and he really helped me, I think, clarify and learn how to be a good manager, to be
Mm.
clear on expectations, of
Mm.
not holding people to expectations that had not been communicated to them.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
that's
that
huge.
that has really shaped how I view things. And so, I mean,
Mm.
it's a mix. But then
Yeah.
there's also the challenge in ministry. I think you have an entitlement with a lot of people because, you
Mm.
know, we have so many different audiences we serve. I've got alumni, I've got donors, I've got churches, I've got parents, and there are people who have been connected to camp much longer than me, that they feel like ownership is not the right word, but that's what entitlement, ownership. They feel a sense of, this is theirs, And when you start monkeying with that, you start
Oh
messing with
yeah.
that. It's who moved my cheese.
Huh. Right.
It's then you're starting to get into an element of people that they're not seeing the maybe the big picture or the mission or the vision of camp. I had to deal with it
Mm.
specifically on how we handle our male service staff. So this typically are guys that were ages 14, 17, or 18 who were not counselors or our program team in the summer at camp.
Hmm.
That they had cabins that they were away from the rest of camp, and it had become a shrine of their it was filled with road signs and pictures, different mementos of things that
Yeah.
they had acquired over the years. And I remember having a conversation when I moved the staff up from being isolated, because that's not good for teenage males, to ever be
Right.
disconnected from supervision and accountability.
Yeah.
When I moved them, I got so much feedback, pushback,
Wow.
critique from people of like, I'm trying to ruin camp. It's like, no, I'm trying to actually embrace what we say we are as a Christian camp and creating Christian community. So we value honesty, we value integrity. And so
Hmm.
I said to one of the people, I said, well, did you buy the road signs that were in there? Like, do you think the other guys bought the road signs? And I said, well, no. I said,
Yeah, right.
tell me how that decor contributes to this idea that we are followers of Jesus and living in his world. And so they couldn't do it. But so,
Yeah.
as I've been able to explain it to folks, they have understood, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't the best. That wasn't ideally. And so, that was one of the examples I think of how people have a sense of entitlement. Oh, and then there's other ones. I mean, there's plenty of other ones of
That makes a ton of sense, and well, especially in your case when you're dealing with camp, where you've got people who've maybe grown up through the ministry, right? They've had their experiences as kids over the years, and yeah, you do. Like when I was on staff with Young Life, we would face the same thing where kids, as they came up through and then eventually became leaders, there is a certain entitlement. Like this is my ministry, this is my, and then often for them, and I know it was for me too, there's a little bit of a rude awakening. That's like, wait, there's another side to this that I wasn't aware of before. All the things that happen behind the scenes, and I have to leave my childish ways behind me and lay claim to adulthood,
yeah.
and responsibility again. Um, do you think that that whole, you mentioned the culture of maybe grace and love being overemphasized? It sounds like you're saying this, but I want to ask you specifically. Do you think that was what contributed to the camp, the unhealthiness of the camp when you took over?
It's really difficult to say because I wasn't there. I only have
I see.
the the uh, the archaeological evidence, I'll say it,
Yeah,
of what
that's
I have
great.
discovered
Yeah.
to make my assumptions on.
Okay.
And I think there was the difficulty of maybe being graciously direct. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you can be direct and you can be a prick about it,
Yeah. Right.
but I don't know that we were necessarily graciously direct. But maybe more than that, it was a lack of consistency.
Interesting. Okay. Yep.
And that's where I think if there's a lack of consistency, there is then no understanding of what is reality, because
Yep.
things are always changing on what's okay, what's not okay.
Yep.
And so another example, I I may ask you to take this out
Okay.
of,
That's fine.
of the live version, only because I don't have an issue anymore of it with it. But we have our pool house. I know we didn't spend a whole lot of time at man camp down by but we have a pool
Yeah.
house that it was encouraged by my predecessor and even other executive staff. Like they let the staff jump off of that into the pool, and I'm just like, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I had to my first year, second year say, look, you jump off of it, you're getting fired. Like that is not okay. And I
Yeah.
know it was commonplace, but the fact that my role like encouraged that
Yep.
like blows my mind that there are so many liability things there that it just was so shocking that any adult would say, yes, it's okay for you to jump. I mean, it's only a, 12 foot at the highest point, but you're still jumping 6 or 7 feet from the edge of the roof into the pool. A lot could go wrong.
Oh,
Is
absolutely. That's a huge. I mean, think
that
about the insurance risk. Like,
right? Right.
seriously, would that? I don't know if they would cover that if something were to happen. You'd be in serious liability issues there.
Right, right. And so that's where I think my previous experience had shown me like the things you need to be aware of as a executive leader that my predecessor who had served in the church came to the camp and then went back to the church,
Yeah. Okay.
didn't quite have that same sense of seriousness on it. That's my
Mm-hmm.
perception
Sure.
that I want to be very, very careful
Absolutely. Yeah.
with what I say. But so that's one example. In my second summer, we fired 9 people.
I'm sorry. Did you say you fired 9 people?
Yeah, we fired 9 of our summer staff because
Wow.
they all broke curfew. In and this is to illustrate the point of I think a
Hmm.
lack of consistency that
Hmm.
it took me like I think 2 weeks to actually get the proof before I start. Well, I fired 3 people that night because they admitted to it. They went home and didn't come back. But then I had parents saying, like, kind of pleading their case
Oh
that
yeah.
basically this had happened in the past and nothing was done about it. And it's like, well, I'm sorry that that's the case, but that's not how I run things. And so, we
Yep.
let 9 people go. And that was a real turning point culturally for us that they
Hmm.
knew I wouldn't take their shenanigans
Yep.
on misbehaving. That I think too often the way we joke about things, I'm all for humor, and I think you know that. Like I
Yeah.
love sarcasm, but I don't think we should joke, especially as believers, toward the idea of dismissing or undermining authority or the laws that we ought to be following. Like that there's
Hmm.
like it's great to joke, but we still have a role that it's not funny to disregard the leaders and authorities that God has placed over us.
Yeah.
And so trying
Hmm.
to bring that order back to camp because I think that's where rightly operating, it's good for the staff to know that their leaders care for them, that they can be trusted. But
Yep.
if there's this below the surface idea of well, I can't really trust them or I don't go to them. Like we're breaking down, I think
Hmm.
the God ordered structure of being mentored by folks and mentoring others, like a, just this whole discipleship chain that we see
Hmm.
in Scripture.
I'm so grateful for you sharing all this. This isn't necessarily where I totally expected us to go in this conversation. So at some point, we're going to have you back. But this is super, super helpful, though, too, as we're thinking through how we lead. There's another guy I had on the podcast, Jeff Hancher, and he does executive coaching in the South Hills. And I'll never forget one of his posts on LinkedIn. He said something about, he said, if you hold your staff accountable to expectations that you have not communicated, you are a monster. That's what he said to them. And I just, that always stuck out to me because he's exactly right. Like that's not like, that's one of the most unhealthy, destructive things, abusive things in some ways you can do to somebody.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you've got a culture like you came into where people were kind of taking advantage of the leadership and they didn't have clear expectations because in some sense they weren't being held accountable to it. It feels harsh at first to lay down those ground rules and to hold people accountable, just like when you're a parent in some ways, right? But ultimately that's what they want. They want it promotes an environment of security, right? And love and a place where grace can really thrive. So anyway, there's just so much there that I think we can take and apply, as we've already kind of alluded to, whether you're in a ministry, Christian setting, or secular. All right, so as we're getting close to the end of the time here, Lyndon, talk a little bit about, share for a few minutes about what you're really excited about with the camp. And let me just say too, so again, I got to go up for man camp. I was blown away, and maybe it was God's timing, but like this was my experience. It was a beautiful. It was in February. It was a beautiful day. I think, yeah, it was in February. Beautiful day. It wasn't too cold. You are taking me on a tour around camp, and it just so happens as we're walking down the hill toward the river that these two bald eagles come flying over top, like
Yeah.
playing with each other, like, and I was like, what? This is crazy. It was like a scene out of a movie. And then I go down to the river myself just to hang out and look and, check things out. And I find like the eagle talons in the mud of the river, like look like an eagle had caught a fish right there. Because there's literally, I don't know if it's officially a river, but like a tributary at least that runs, along the edge of the camp. Just, it is a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. And man, what you've done over the last 10 years, you can tell there's a lot of emphasis on quality and excellence in some of the buildings and the work that's being done on the grounds. It's a beautiful camp. As I've said, and thank you, you guys have been sponsors of the podcast, and so I'm grateful for that as well. But what I say in the advertisement is so true. I was blown away by the excellence of the camp. And I do believe that it's in a sense a diamond in the rough. I think it's something that people in the Pittsburgh region need to take advantage of because, guys, it's the best kept secret right now, and it needs not to be. So anyway, all right, that's enough for me. So Lyndon, what are you excited about as you look forward to the future of the camp?
Well, first, one of the things I love about camp that I would have never thought of camp as anything worthwhile. I worked at camp one
Interesting.
summer. I camped one summer, and my mom volunteered as a camp nurse at Seneca when I was a kid. So I spent time here. My family attended summer camp or a family camp, but
Okay.
I would have never seen the value in camp had I not been there. Like, because if you're a camp family, you get it. Like you're bought in, but if you're not, you're like, why would I do that? And so one of the things I love about camp is that I think if camp is done well, that camp is the best expression of the kingdom of heaven on earth. That is like
Absolutely.
the longer that I'm there, the more that I'm seeing that as I have
Yeah.
seen the culture turn around from my staff all the way down to our seasonal staff, that we have such a unique opportunity to not only learn the values of the kingdom, but to then share that with the next generation. And so,
Yeah.
like, that's one of the things I love about camp is, the 70 scat staff we hire in the summer is, for many of them, it's their first job. We get to, so I have a little orientation meeting with parents on Sunday when they drop their kids off at the start of staff training of, hey, this is your first job. Like, here are some things you can expect from us, just kind of big picture, the curfew. Here's when we'll send your kids home. But more than that, like, this is a part of their discipleship, and we're here
Yeah.
to help you with their discipleship. And so, trying to encourage communication with parents. And
Yeah.
so, that's one of the things I love. Then
Hmm.
the getting to see the staff work together. Mission trips are so formative for kids. So is working at summer camp. That to spend 3 to 8, 9 weeks together, one being trained, but then serving together. Like, you are on mission together, and you're building friendships along the way. And
Yeah.
so it is such a rich gift of God
Hmm.
for our young people to have those experiences. And so watching them build friendships, watching them serve
Hmm.
together, watching them see how their role contributes to the success of the ministry. I
Hmm.
mean, I love that aspect of what we do. I've been trying to incorporate surveys into what I do for campers and for staff. And one of the questions I ask staff at the end of the summer is, do you feel like your work mattered?
Hmm.
And everybody said yes.
That's awesome.
That, trying to create a culture that they see, that whether they're on the maintenance team, whether they're on the food service team, they're on our media team, lifeguarding, everybody has a part to play towards the success of the ministry. Now, it's our counselors and our program and our volunteers who are, they are the ones who are engaged with the campers on the day-to-day basis, but everybody else has a role to play behind the scenes. And so helping them see, they may not think it's the most glamorous job, but it is it is essential to the success of our ministry that they do their jobs well so that everything else can happen. So I love that. Then when you get down to campers, one of the things I love about camp, how many places do you get to go and be disconnected from technology? I mean, I
Yeah.
love
Oh,
my device, but I think I've noticed is that kids need a break. They want to
absolutely.
break,
Yep.
and often it's parents who have the hard time of being disconnected from their kids than
Yeah.
their kids being disconnected. When we were kids, I remember
Mm.
I grew up in a small town, and so in Butler, and it was you go out when the street lights come on is when you come home. It wasn't anything before that. I mean,
Right.
rarely would you want to go home, but our
Yeah,
parents didn't want
right.
to hear from us. You went to camp for a
Yeah.
week, maybe they wrote you a letter. They probably wrote you a letter, but you're
Yeah.
not going to call them. You're not going to text them. And so
Yeah.
camp helps kids relearn to be human, very human, basic experiences of friendships, of teamwork, of interacting and engaging one another without being mediated by technology. And I
Hmm.
think that's so important. And studies are showing, I think, the dangers of social media and technology. And
Yep.
so how can we encourage the next generation to maybe think differently? I think so
Yep.
much of our society, we're swept into the current of what everybody's doing. And so
Yep.
how do we break from that? And camp is one of those places where you get a pause on all the busyness, and you're put right down in the middle of God's creation. You
With
you
eagles flying
see
over top.
with eagles. Yeah, I don't
Flying
order
overhead.
that for everybody, but I did for you that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
get to reminded of the wonder God who made all things.
Truth at Work executive peer advisory groups are a life and business changing experience. Trust me, I've experienced it myself. It made such an impact on me that I stepped out to become a chapter president myself. At Truth at Work, we're dedicated to helping Christian business leaders who feel isolated and overwhelmed. Our community of like-minded peers are here to help leaders like you live out your faith in the marketplace and build your business on biblical principles. Christian business leaders are transformed through these peer advisory groups that apply biblical truth for living out our faith in all areas of life. If you'd like to learn more about Truth at Work, email me, Mike Hatch, at mhatch@truthatwork.org, or you can email my counterpart, Dave Hartman, at dhartman@truthatwork.org.
But you get to reminded of the wonder God who made all things, and you get to hear about his grace and his mercy in chapel, in missions, and Bible study, and have time to process that and think, what does my faith mean to me for
Mm-hmm.
campers, and take that with them. And so I mean
Mm.
that's some of what I love about camp. And I mean I love it's an incredible ministry, a great opportunity. And I will say, though, as much as I think camp is the best expression of the kingdom of heaven, I also know camp's not for everybody. Like it,
Mm.
there are some kids you should not force to go to camp. Like
Yeah.
you might do more damage if you send
Yeah.
them too soon.
Yeah.
And so,
Hmm.
but
That's a good
but we
word.
really see ourselves as wanting to be partners with the parents and the discipling of their kids in the church. and
Yeah.
and because it's so formative, I'm hearing stories. I had a camper reach out to us on the website a couple of weeks ago and said, was asking if we had records from the chapel speaker back in the 80s. Like, okay, that's
Wow.
a 10-year span. I don't quite know. So she's probably around my age. And she said, I know that the Holy Spirit used that man. That, and she said, had I not encountered God in the chapel there, she said, I would not still be here. Like
Wow.
that, reflecting back, 40 years later, that
Wow.
having such an impactful moment. Like we don't want to replace the work of the church. Like that is not our job,
Sure.
but we want to support the work of the church.
Yep.
Because I'm on here, I'll say So for those of you who are parents, who do you want your kids to be? And then what
Yeah.
are the decisions you're making now to invest in that way? You know,
Hmm.
I think, let's be honest, not many of our kids are actually going to be professional athletes.
Yeah.
But
Right.
what they're going to be is they are going to be kingdom builders. And what tools are we giving them now that will serve them in the future? And so, what we do at Seneca is to try to give them space for uh, building and discovering some basic spiritual disciplines to take with them, so that they will leave being encouraged to be in God's word. They will leave encouraged to be praying. They will leave encouraged to know they're not alone following
Mm.
Jesus when they go back to their homes and their families and their schools. That camp's an incredible place. Certainly recommend it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, it's really hard. I wish you were more enthusiastic about it. You could really up the level of your passion would be really great. Might be a better salesman that way.
Maybe
No,
next time I can work
yeah,
on that. I can try
maybe
to
you
do
can
that.
work. Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe that's no, Lyndon. It comes through, man. It comes through in you. I love hearing you describe that. And man, having been through Young Life, it wasn't Seneca Hills Bible Camp, but I did serve at other camps that were like Seneca Hills, who shall not be mentioned. It isn't what you described is so true. A little piece of heaven on earth, like a glimpse of what it means to be serving together like that. Because that is, we're not just going to be playing harps, riding on clouds, forever in heaven. We're going to be doing work. Like God has he's preparing us here in many ways for the things that we're going to be contributing to his kingdom in eternity. Like that's so exciting, and to be in a community, a missional community like it is at a camp like that. Oh, it's transforming. It's absolutely transforming. So, okay, thank you for that. And then, so as we wrap up here, Lyndon, though, how do folks connect with you? How do they reach out? I know you're probably, let me see here. We're in November right now. This will air about January, I think. So you'll probably be in full prep mode for, applications for camp and getting kids ready for the summer and everything. Yeah, if folks are interested in doing that and developing a relationship with the camp, what's their first step?
So a couple of things. First, check out the website, senecahills.org. That's one of the best ways to just learn about, see some pictures. Our telephone numbers on there. You can call camp. If you're curious, come up to camp. I'll give you a tour. I can't promise that
Yeah.
you'll get eagles like
Yeah.
Mike did, but
Yeah.
happy to show. Like we will give tours any time of the year, because this is one of those different things. Like, we're not in it for the money, we're in it for the partnership, like we're in it for the ministry. And so
Yep.
bring kids up. We do some things to engage the community. We have an open climbing on Wednesday evenings through most
Oh,
of the year.
yeah,
We
real
have an
quick.
indoor climbing gym.
It is world class, gang. I'm serious. Being up there and experiencing it or seeing it myself, this climbing gym, this rock cave wall, everything you've got, it is unreal. Highly encourage you to check that out, especially if you're a rock climber.
And so we're putting a new rec center floor in a week or two,
Oh, cool.
and we will have two indoor volleyball courts and two indoor pickleball courts. So we're trying to figure out how we can engage the community more, have more space. But come up for a tour, give a call. The first Saturday in May, though, I'd say come up. We have open house and we have work day. If you can come and volunteer, or you can come and get a tour. Then we provide lunch, and there's a way to RSVP on the website, or there will be before that event. But those would be some of the ways. And then if you are, in terms of business folks, I'm always looking for folks. Do you encourage your folks to volunteer? Like, we are
Mm,
always in need of
mm,
volunteers. We've got about 250 acres, 38, 39 buildings that need to be maintained. I have a year-round staff of 6, so we're a really small staff,
yeah.
but we are dependent upon the generosity of others for their time and their treasure to keep this ministry going.
Mm,
And so, if you're looking for ways for your people to volunteer, I've had folks, companies come up and they will do certain projects around camp. If you
great.
have like a skill set that you want to employ, like, we have
Mm,
plenty of projects. Would love to talk to you about how can you help make our campus beautiful for serving others, whether that
Yeah.
be landscaping wise or building something. Like we've got a number of projects that are underway as we seek to improve camp. But those are some of the
Mm.
main ways. And so for those businesses, if you have charitable giving you want to do, we can help you with that. We can help you reach any
Mm.
limit you have. That's what
What a
I like
great
to tell folks. Like,
opportunity.
yeah, we can help you reach your limit of charitable giving. But
That's amazing.
our cost of camp is seriously underwritten by our renting out our facility to churches, schools, and businesses for their own retreats,
Yep.
as well as our donations. So we only charge about half of what it costs us to
Mm.
operate for summer
Okay.
camp, and that we rely on the generosity, which is roughly 30% of my annual revenue comes from individual donations. So for folks
Wow.
who kind of jive with this vision, I know it's not for
Yeah.
everybody, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But if it does jive with you, like, would love to talk to you about what does it mean to partner with Seneca, and even how can we help you and help promote what the work that you do, because I hire
Mm-hmm.
70 high school and college age students every year who will be looking for jobs and will have various skill sets of trying to develop some of those partnerships, that how can we serve businesses in this region as well with the
That's great.
people that we're developing as young men and women.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Man, okay. Lindon, gosh, this is so good. I'm so grateful for the perspective you brought, for the conversation we got to have, and for the value that I think our listeners got to receive from your experience. Definitely going to have you back again at some point, because I feel like we just touched the surface. I feel like there's some more that we could actually dive into and glean from you. But man, thank you so much for being with us today, brother. And I look forward to getting back to camp at some point soon.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the chance to be on here, and I appreciate the work of this podcast. I love hearing the stories of folks, and appreciate what you're trying to do to serve our region of the kingdom.
Let's get to work!